Unauthorized use may result in legal liability. The shrill ringing of the alarm clock sliced through the morning silence, pulling Declan Hayward from the world of dreams back into cold reality. He instinctively reached out to the other side of the bed, but his hand met only empty, cold sheets. Frowning, he sat up, running a hand over his face in an attempt to shake off the drowsiness. "Lily?" he called, but silence was the only response. Declan got up, his bare feet touching the wooden floor, which creaked under his weight. He stepped out of the bedroom, scanning the living room. The house felt too empty. The cups on the kitchen table remained untouched. The coffee maker hadn't even been turned on. Strange, his wife always made coffee first. An unsettling feeling crept into his chest, tightening around his ribs like an iron band. He quickly walked toward his daughter's room. The door was slightly ajar. The bed was neatly made, as if Lauren hadn't slept there at all. Something was wrong. He grabbed his phone from the desk, checked his messages. Nothing. No text from Lily. No text from Lauren. No missed calls. No explanations. And then, breaking through the silence of the house, came the sound of the television. The screen flickered, and before Declan's eyes appeared a scene both familiar and horrifyingly foreign. His wife was on the news. Lily, wearing a perfectly pressed blouse, her hair styled neatly, her lips red but carefully painted. Her eyes were filled with tears, and her voice trembled as she spoke. I stayed silent for so long. I was so afraid, but now, thanks to Governor Stanley Hayes, I feel like I can finally speak. He helped me find the strength to escape this nightmare. Declan froze. Domestic violence is one of the most terrifying issues in our society, the news anchor said. And today, we're sharing the shocking story of a woman who managed to escape from a household tyrant. The image changed. On the screen was his face, his photograph. But beside it, in bold capital letters, was the headline, Declan Hayward. Abuser, liar, dangerous. The blow to his chest was so strong he could hardly breathe. This man, Lily's voice broke. She covered her face with her hands, pausing dramatically before sobbing and continuing. He terrorized me, hit me. Lauren, oh God, poor Lauren, she was so scared. Is your daughter safe now? The anchor asked, her voice dripping with exaggerated sympathy. Yes, Governor Hayes personally helped us. He provided us with protection, a safe place. He promised we'd never have to see that monster again. Blood pounded in Declan's temples. What the? He whispered, stepping backward. But before he could process it, something even more real and terrifying interrupted him. Sirens wailed outside. Red and blue lights flooded the windows, turning his cozy farmhouse into the scene of an arrest. Tires screeched. Voices. The sound of car doors slamming. Declan retreated further into the house. But at that moment, the front door burst open with a crash. A tall, broad-shouldered officer in a dark uniform stood in the doorway, his face like stone. Behind him, several other police officers hovered. Declan Hayward, the officer's voice was cold, devoid of respect, filled only with contempt. You're under arrest for physical and sexual abuse of your wife and daughter. The words struck like a sledgehammer. What? You have the right to remain silent? Scumbag, another officer added with a sneer. Anything you say can and will be used against you in court. Though honestly, if I were you, I'd start digging my own grave right now. Declan stared at him, at the cold determination in his eyes. They believed it. They truly believed he was a monster. Outside, reporters were already gathering for the spectacle. Declan Hayward had always been a man who valued simplicity. Not because he didn't know any other life, but because he had once realized that ambition, status, and chasing after power destroyed a person. He had worked as an operative in government agencies, carrying out missions no one spoke about aloud. He had seen what happened to those who wanted too much, who were willing to betray for personal gain. One day, he realized he no longer wanted to be part of that world. So he sold his suburban house, bought an old farm in Oregon, and started over. His farm wasn't big, but it was cozy, a wooden house with a large porch, a small field, and a spacious enclosure for animals. Declan had always dreamed of keeping alpacas, and when he moved, he bought two. One Auburn male named Baxter and a white female named Neva. Over time, they had offspring, and the herd grew to 8. These animals became his therapy, quiet, peaceful, with curious little faces, grazing calmly in the fields, unlike people who always demanded, expected, and used. His wife, Lily, had initially supported his decision. When he suggested leaving the city for the countryside, she found it romantic. Back then, they were still happy. They got married when he was 32 and she was 26. She was elegant, beautiful, with slightly idealized views on life, but Declan loved her for it. He loved how she brought color to his home, how she added lightness to his sometimes overly rational world. Then Lauren was born, and everything changed. Lily wanted more, better opportunities for their daughter, social life, the city. She repeatedly talked about moving, insisting that the farm was temporary, that Lauren shouldn't grow up among dirt and hay. But Declan stood firm in his decision. He saw how happy their daughter was there, how she ran barefoot through the grass, wove flower crowns, rode the small pony he had bought just for her. Lauren was his little ray of light, his joy. Her laughter was the purest happiness he had ever known. Over the years, the difference in their views grew wider. Lily became colder. She started going to the city under the pretense of shopping, then later, under the pretense of work, supposedly consulting for a small interior design firm. Declan felt her slipping away, but he didn't know how to stop it. And then, he appeared. Senator Stanley Hayes. The first time Declan saw him was at Lauren's birthday party. Lily said he was an investor interested in local businesses. He arrived in a sleek black car, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, with a fake friendly smile. Tall, fit, with impeccable hair, the kind of man you see in commercials. He introduced himself as a family friend, showered Lily with compliments, shaking Declan's hand as if to show who the real man was. Declan instantly knew this man had an agenda. Hayes carried himself with too much confidence, too much ease in his home. After that visit, Lily started spending even more time in the city. Within months, she no longer hid the fact that she was working at the senator's office. Declan tried to talk to her. He noticed the distant look in her eyes, how she no longer wanted to spend time with him. Even Lauren had changed. She had become colder, always glued to her phone, no longer running to him with questions like before. One day, he saw Lily wearing an expensive bracelet. He knew he hadn't bought it. "Where did you get that?" "Oh, it's a gift from clients," she replied with a smile, but he already knew the truth. That night, he didn't sleep. Everything became clear when he accidentally overheard Lily on the phone. He won't understand. He's stuck in his past. But you're right. We need to do something so we can move forward. At that moment, Declan still didn't know what they had planned. But he knew one thing. His family was falling apart right before his eyes. The prison cell where Declan Hayward ended up wasn't just small. It was suffocating, pressing down on him with its dampness and the stale stench of sweat, blood, and fear. The concrete walls, covered in faded scrawls from previous inmates, felt cold even in the summer heat. A tiny, murky window with bars barely let any light in, turning daylight into a dull gray haze that only made everything worse. He sat on the creaky cot, his back against the wall, absent-mindedly running his fingers over the stubble on his face. His eyes reflected the exhaustion of a man who once believed in justice but now sat here, reeking in a prison jumpsuit, surrounded by the very people he had always despised. On the lower bunk next to him, his cellmate, a wiry man in his 50s with tattoos that told the story of a life steeped in violence, was rolling a cigarette. His name was Ray the Butcher Miller, and he wasn't the kind of guy who asked unnecessary questions. But Declan could tell. Even he was watching him with interest. "So ex-cop, huh?" Ray muttered, exhaling a plume of smoke that mixed with the stench of sweat-soaked mattresses and rotting food from the corridor. "What did you get nailed for?" Declan smirked quietly. "Cop." He hadn't been a cop for a long time, but trying to explain that to a stinking convict across from him was pointless. "I was set up," he answered flatly, staring at the cracked ceiling. Ray chuckled, a raspy laugh escaping through his teeth. "Yeah, that's what they all say, pal." But Declan continued, ignoring him. He had spent days replaying everything that had happened, and the more he thought about it, the more his anger burned. I had a wife, Lily. We lived on a farm, a quiet life, far from the filth of this world. I thought we were a family, but his fist clenched, knuckles turning white. She was seeing someone else, a senator. He had money, power, connections. I didn't realize what she was planning at first, but by the time I did, it was too late. Ray listened in silence now, genuine interest in his eyes. They set a goddamn trap. He built his campaign on fighting domestic violence. He needed a high-profile victim. I became that victim. Declan ran his hands down his face. She started playing the role of the perfect victim, talking about fear, about how I controlled her. Then they dragged my daughter into it. They pulled her away from me, fed her lies. Lily cried in front of the cameras, told everyone how terrified she had been, and everyone believed her. He swallowed hard, recalling the news, the headlines, the faces of people he had known for years, people who now looked at him like he was a monster. The trial was rigged from the start. They set everything up. I wasn't even given time to prepare. They didn't even let me find a lawyer I could trust. They pressured everyone who could help me, threatened to ruin their careers, destroy their reputations. I was completely isolated. Ray kept smoking, but his gaze had turned colder, more understanding. He knew all too well how the world worked. Wait, he squinted, exhaling another cloud of smoke. What about your daughter? Did she testify against you too? Declan didn't answer right away. His jaw clenched, fists tightening until his knuckles ached. Because that was the most painful question of all. Ray watched him in silence, holding his cigarette between his yellowed fingers. Declan ran his hand over his face again, feeling the rough stubble under his palm. He was exhausted, tired of thinking, tired of the stinking air, tired of the fact that even after 2 years, the hatred inside him still burned. They knew Lauren was my weakness. He finally said, his voice hollow. They didn't force her to testify against me. I think she refused, but they didn't let her defend me either. They twisted it so that anything she said would be interpreted as a result of fear. The official version was that it would be traumatic for the girl to face her abusive father. They painted me as a deranged veteran who supposedly couldn't handle life after the war and started acting erratic. Ray snorted. Shitty situation, man. Declan let out a bitter smile. They took the truth and twisted it. He went on, locking his fingers together. Yeah, I was grumpy. The neighbors could confirm that. But they could also confirm that I was always the first to help if someone needed their fence fixed or their tractor broke down. They could say that I always showed up for community work, fixed the plumbing, hell, even fed their dogs when they went out of town. But no one listened. Ray stubbed out his cigarette, crushing the butt into a rusty tin can that served as an ashtray. They crushed you. The guy against you was too powerful. Declan smirked. And then came the final move. Hayes wanted to secure his victory. Ray leaned in slightly. He proposed to Lily. Took Lauren under his last name. Declan's voice was flat. That way, he didn't just get rid of me. He gained public admiration. It was a brilliant political move. He didn't just save a woman and her child. He made himself a hero, a caring new husband and father. That won him the election. Ray whistled. What a son of a bitch. And me? Declan leaned back against the cot, staring at the ceiling. I've been rotting in here for 2 years now. Silence hung in the air. And Lily, he added after a moment, still sends me postcards. Ray blinked in surprise. You're kidding. She actually has the nerve? Want to read one? Declan sat up and pulled a tattered envelope from under his mattress. He opened it and handed the postcard to Ray. On the front was a winter landscape with neat golden letters reading, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Ray flipped it over and slowly read aloud. Cuckold, another year of my victory and a comfortable life without you and your stinking grumpy attitude. Hope they're at least feeding you well in there. But who am I kidding? You belong exactly where you are. Best wishes, Lily. He fell silent, staring at the card, then at Declan. Bitch, he said finally, tossing the card back into the envelope. A real piece of work. Declan didn't respond. He just smirked, but there was something in his eyes that made Ray uneasy. Lily's home was now in an elite neighborhood. One of those mansion-lined streets where the houses looked like doll castles, complete with manicured lawns and gleaming windows. Security guards, surveillance cameras, automated gates with code access. It was all part of her new life. She sat in a spacious living room, her legs stretched out on a plush couch, a glass of expensive red wine in hand. On the television screen, her husband, now officially Governor Stanley Hayes, was giving an interview. "We have made tremendous strides in the fight against domestic violence," he said confidently, standing at the podium. "My story with Lily is just one example of how we can help victims. We will continue our work and ensure that no tyrants or abusers poison the lives of families in this state." Lily smiled smugly, taking a sip of her wine. This performance had been going on for 2 years, and she was enjoying every moment of it. Her new life had turned out to be far better than she had imagined. Lauren was upstairs in her room. Their relationship had grown cold. The girl was no longer the cheerful, trusting daughter she had once been. A wall of detachment and isolation had formed between them. She barely spoke to Lily, and Stanley, he didn't even bother to build any kind of relationship with her. The doorbell rang. Lily frowned slightly, setting down her glass. "James!" She called for the security guard. A moment later, a tall man in a sharp suit entered the living room. His face was unreadable, but his eyes spoke volumes. "Lily, we need to talk," he said hoarsely. "Oh, not now." She sighed in irritation. "I'm relaxing. Can it wait?" James stepped closer. "It's about Declan Hayward." The glass in her hand froze. Slowly, she placed it on the glass table and turned to face the guard, suddenly feeling the heat rush to her face. "What about him?" Her voice was steady, but inside, everything tensed. James looked at her, as if deciding how to deliver the news. "He's gone." Lily frowned. "What do you mean gone?" "The block supervisor checked his cell this morning. It was empty." Lily went rigid. "You're saying he escaped?" James said nothing, but that silence was enough. The room became deafeningly quiet. "But how?" Her voice cracked. "That's impossible. There's security, cameras, double-barred doors. Damn it. He couldn't have just disappeared." "That's exactly why it hasn't been reported in the news yet," James replied calmly. "Only the governor has been informed." Lily swallowed hard. "Does he know?" "He's already aware. He asked that you stay inside the house until the situation is resolved." Lily shot up to her feet, wrapping her arms around herself. Suddenly, she realized her heart was pounding too fast, and inside, a long-forgotten feeling was creeping in, fear. Declan was a veteran. He knew how to disappear, how to survive. She tried to compose herself, but her fingers trembled. "You know what this means, don't you?" she whispered, looking at James. He nodded. "It means he's coming for you." Stanley Hayes had never been a man who was afraid. He had built his life on power and control. Every move was calculated, every risk minimized. But now his world was beginning to crumble. Declan Hayward had disappeared. That couldn't be. It simply wasn't supposed to happen. Stanley sat in his office, gripping a whiskey glass so tightly his fingers trembled. That only angered him more. Across the desk stood his head of security, a broad-shouldered man named Grant Miller, a former FBI agent hired precisely for situations like this. "Find him," Stanley snarled, throwing a sharp look at the man across from him. "Search every damn inch. Check the cameras, security logs, recordings from the last 24 hours. Someone helped him get out." "We're already on it," Grant replied in a level voice. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't nearly enough. Stanley shot up from his chair, pacing the office before stopping with his palms pressed against the desk. "What about his cellmate?" Grant nodded. "We already spoke with him." "And?" Grant hesitated for a moment, as if unsure how to phrase it. "You'd better hear it for yourself. Maximum security prison. Cell 17. Ray the Butcher Miller lounged on his cot, legs stretched out, idly rolling a cigarette between his fingers. The cell smelled of damp concrete, metal, and stale smoke. He didn't even bother standing when 2 guards entered, followed by Stanley Hayes himself, his jaw clenched in rage. The politician stopped in front of him, looking down, but Ray only cast a lazy glance up at him and took a slow drag from his cigarette. "Where is he?" Stanley asked without preamble. Ray smirked, flicking ashes onto the floor. "Well, damn. A personal visit from the governor himself." Should have brought out the cigars. I'm not here for jokes, Hayes hissed. Tell me what you know. Ray finally pulled the cigarette from his lips, looking up at him for a long moment, as if deciding whether it was even worth responding. You know what he said to me before he disappeared? Stanley clenched his fists. What? Ray grinned, leaned forward, and slowly, deliberately said, Get ready to die. You son of a bitch for what you've done. I was asked to deliver the message. Stanley froze. You won't get another word out of me, Ray added, leaning back and taking another slow drag. The politician stared at him, feeling something tighten inside him. Fear. Real, ice-cold fear crawled up his spine. The guards awaited his orders. He made it clear he's coming for you, Ray added lazily. And, I kind of like the sound of that. Stanley turned sharply and stormed out of the cell, slamming the door behind him. Governor's residence, he reinforced security. More personnel, handpicked from the best, were deployed around the mansion's grounds. Armed security vehicles patrolled the streets surrounding the house. Additional cameras, laser sensors, double security checks for all staff. Everything was in place. Hayes had no intention of becoming a victim. He couldn't. He was a winner. But Declan had escaped. And that meant only one thing. He was coming. Dawn, city outskirts. A thin morning mist crept over the asphalt, shrouding parked cars and muffling the distant hum of the few passing vehicles. The narrow street, usually silent, was alive with the wail of police sirens and the crackle of radio chatter. A black sedan, parked near an abandoned warehouse, had caught the attention of a passing stranger when he noticed that the doors were slightly ajar and something inside reflected the morning light. Curious, he stepped closer, peering through the window, and seconds later, his scream shattered the morning stillness. James Carter, the governor's head of security, sat slumped in the driver's seat, his head tilted back, lifeless eyes staring blankly at the car's ceiling. His mouth was sealed with duct tape, and around his throat was a thin, dark crimson mark, the unmistakable sign of strangulation. But the most chilling part was something else. Scrawled in bold black paint across the windshield, directly in front of Carter's dead eyes, was a single word. Beginning, the police moved swiftly. Forensics arrived. The perimeter was cordoned off. Reporters were kept at bay. But news had already begun leaking online. A few minutes later, one of the officers glanced up from his notepad and nodded to his partner. Do we notify the governor? Immediately. Governor's residence. Morning Stanley Hayes woke to the shrill ring of his phone. Groggily, he pried his eyes open, feeling the bitter dryness of last night's whiskey in his throat. Beside him, Lily lay under the satin sheets, still asleep, her face peaceful, like she had nothing to fear. He reached for the nightstand, grabbed the phone, and pressed it to his ear. What? He rasped, his irritation evident. Governor, we have a problem. Grant's voice was tense, clipped, devoid of unnecessary emotion. Stanley sat up, rubbing his temples. Speak. Carter is dead. He froze. What? They found him a few hours ago. Strangled. In a car at a warehouse. Who? That's the most interesting part. Grant's voice hardened. There was a message, written across the windshield. Stanley's blood ran cold. What did it say? Grant didn't hesitate. Beginning. Hayes threw off the blanket and got out of bed, pacing the room, trying to control his breathing. It's him, he exhaled. Most likely. Where's my daughter? Inside the house. Under heavy security. We've reinforced all measures. Stanley gritted his teeth, feeling his pulse hammering in his skull. He knew that Declan wouldn't stop. Public humiliation, the square in front of City Hall, was packed with people. The state flags fluttered in the crisp autumn breeze, and a gathered crowd held banners in support of Governor Hayes. Everything had been meticulously organized. This rally was meant to solidify his status, to reaffirm the people's trust. Stanley Hayes stood on stage, smiling at the crowd, delivering a speech about a bright future and public safety. Beside him stood Lily, dressed in an elegant light blue dress, her hands resting on the podium. Lauren was there too, though she lingered further back, her expression vacant, as if she had long since realized how meaningless this spectacle was. And then, a low, Guttural rumble of engines echoed through the square. Stanley faltered mid-sentence. From a street, black armored vehicles rolled onto the plaza, pulling up directly in front of City Hall steps. The crowd stirred. Whispers turned to murmurs, murmurs to alarm shouts. People pulled out their phones, filming the unfolding scene. Soldiers in full tactical gear, armed to the teeth, moved swiftly, forming a perimeter around the stage. Their movements were crisp, disciplined. This wasn't ordinary law enforcement. These were professionals, the kind who didn't show up without a reason. Hayes clenched his fists, but his face remained a mask of composure. What the hell? He muttered, leaning toward Grant, who looked just as unsettled. The crowd buzzed with questions. Is this a drill? Part of the security program? But no answers came. Then, a voice boomed through the loudspeakers of the armored vehicles, deep, authoritative, commanding. Stanley Hayes, you are under arrest on suspicion of state crimes and corrupt ties to criminal organizations. Remain where you are and do not resist. Silence. For a few long seconds, absolute, stunned silence. And then, chaos erupted. What? For the first time, the unwavering authority in Hayes's voice cracked into panic. He staggered back, his gaze darting wildly between the soldiers, his wife, and then to Lauren, who stood frozen, eyes wide with shock. The troops were already storming the stage, rifles pointed downward, but their presence radiated sheer force. This is a mistake, Hayes roared. I'm the governor. I demand an explanation. But none was given. A tall, wiry officer with a harsh face stepped forward. Without a word, he pulled out a pair of handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. You can't do this. Hayes recoiled, grasping for any shred of authority. I'll call the president. This is a conspiracy. This is click. Cold steel snapped around his wrists. The crowd, still filming, erupted into a mix of gasps, jeers, and even applause. And then Lily was grabbed too. Lily Hayes, you are under arrest as an accomplice. She let out a strangled gasp, thrashing weakly in their grip. No. Her voice turned shrill as she spun toward her husband, but he was no longer looking at her. Stanley, tell them this is a mistake. Hayes looked at her and turned away. He had bigger problems. The soldiers dragged them off the stage. And then, amidst the noise, came a voice, deep, steady, unwavering. You finally got what was coming to you, you bastard. Hayes froze. The soldiers parted, making way for the one man he never wanted to see again. Declan Hayward stepped onto the stage, dressed in dark tactical gear, a shadow of stubble lining his jaw. He looked at Hayes the way a predator looks at its prey. The crowd roared with excitement. Soldiers stood at attention. Lily saw him and gasped, her face twisting in horror. You? But he didn't even look at her. He was looking only at Hayes. Hello, Governor. And at that moment, everything stopped. The price of betrayal. Hayes struggled to keep his breathing steady, but it felt like his lungs were clamped in a vice. Everything had happened too fast. Just hours ago, he had stood on stage, basking in the glow of his own glory, and now he was tied to a hard chair in a dark, damp room that could have been an old warehouse or an abandoned barracks. His hands were pulled behind his back, his wrists burning from the cuffs. His eyes darted feverishly around, searching for something familiar. But there was nothing. Only them. Soldiers. Not ordinary troops. Not police officers. No, these men were something else entirely. They weren't looking at him the way people look at a prisoner. There was no indifferent lawfulness in their eyes. Only contempt. 5 men, all in combat tactical gear, stood around him. Their movements were unhurried, but there was a honed deadliness about them, the kind that came from years of knowing how to control any situation. One of them, a tall black man with cold eyes, leaned against the concrete wall and smirked. Well, Governor, he drawled lazily. What an honor. We got the man of the year in the house. He glanced at his comrades. What's his name again? Stanley Hayes, another man answered, a blonde with a square jaw, though I just call him a sack of shit. They laughed. Hayes swallowed, licking his dry lips. You have no right, he managed to croak, trying to keep his voice from shaking. Oh, No right. Someone mocked from the side. Well, that's news. Hey, Hank, we got ourselves a legal expert here. Yeah, a half-assed one, Hank replied, idly flipping a knife between his fingers. Hayes turned his eyes to the real threat. Declan. He stood slightly apart, arms crossed over his chest, watching. There was no rage on his face, no wild fury. Only certainty. Declan finally spoke, his voice low and steady, yet carrying an undercurrent that sent a shiver down Hayes' spine. I had a lot of time to think in that prison cell. He took a slow step forward, crouching so their eyes were level. You know what I thought about? Hayes swallowed hard but said nothing. Declan smirked. You. He patted Hayes' cheek, lightly, almost friendly, but the humiliation stung worse than any slap. I thought about how you, a pathetic piece of shit, managed to fool everyone. How you took my life and spit in my face while I rotted in that cell. Hayes jerked against the restraints, but the cuffs and straps binding him to the chair didn't budge an inch. You won't get away with this. You have no power. Declan laughed softly. Power? He nodded toward his men. See these guys? Hayes glanced at the soldiers. They're my brothers. They've known me for more than a couple of years. Not from the news. We've died for each other. We ate sand while you sat in your office licking the boots of politicians. Declan stepped closer, his voice turning to ice. These men? They're not like your puppets. You can't buy them. You know why? Hayes felt his throat go dry. Because we have a code. Declan's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. What do you have? He slammed his fist against the chair beside Hayes. The governor flinched. You thought you could just erase me? Break me? Declan straightened and walked around the chair. Well, this is what happens when you bet on the wrong man. He snapped his fingers. One of the soldiers stepped forward, pulling something metallic from his gear. What is that? Hayes stammered, his breath coming in shallow gasps. That, Hank grinned, holding up the tool is a nutcracker. A pause. Or a ball cracker, depending on what's tougher. They laughed. Hayes went white. And no, you can't. Declan leaned down, whispering into his ear. We can. Click. Steel plates closed. Hayes screamed. No. Yes, you bastard. Declan grabbed his face, forcing him to look into his eyes. The fall of the perfect leader, Hayes was gasping for breath, his face red, drenched in sweat. The nutcracker still gleamed in Hank's hands, ready to clamp down. He tried to keep up the mask of confidence, but his eyes were darting wildly. He could feel the control slipping away. Declan stepped closer, holding up a phone with the camera recording. And now, Governor, his voice was dripping with venomous sarcasm. Let's talk to the people. You always did love public speeches, didn't you? And no. Hayes rasped, struggling in his restraints. Declan nodded at his men. Help our friends speak clearly. Hank grinned and slammed a fist into Hayes' gut. He wheezed, doubled over as much as the restraints allowed. And in that moment, Declan tilted his face toward the camera. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his tone smooth, almost conversational. This is Stanley Hayes, the man you trusted as your leader. The man who spent years lying to you, building his career on bribes, murder, and shattered lives. Hayes jerked, but one of the soldiers grabbed him by the hair, forcing him to look straight into the camera. Talk. Go to hell. Hayes rasped, but his voice wavered. Declan sighed and snapped his fingers. Hank squeezed the nutcracker, just slightly. Hayes shrieked. Talk. Declan barked. Yes, I bribed judges. Hayes blurted out, his whole body convulsing. Declan smirked. Go on. I fabricated accusations, set people up, got rid of those who stood in my way. And who exactly? Businessmen, opposition politicians, and, in your case, Declan. I paid to have you put away. Declan's lips twitched. And Lily? Hayes froze, but the pain wouldn't let him hold back. She knew. She helped. We planned everything together. She convinced Lauren to turn against you. The camera kept rolling. See that, people? Declan smiled at the camera. Here's your hero. He stopped the recording and handed the phone to one of the soldiers. Upload it. Let the people see who they voted for. A deathly silence filled the room. Declan turned and looked at Lily. She was tied to a chair in the corner of the room, her eyes wide with terror. She trembled. Declan, please. But his gaze was cold, steely. He took a step toward her, and everything stopped. The phone camera shook in her hands. Lily swallowed hard, staring straight into the lens, her lips quivering. Her whole body felt wooden, as if her mind had yet to fully process what was happening. My name is Lily Hayes. Her voice cracked, but Declan didn't give her time to pause. Louder, clearer. No tears, Lily, he commanded. This isn't one of your movies where you play the helpless victim. Right now, you're just going to tell the truth. She gripped the phone tighter and took a deep breath. My name is Lily Hayes, and I lied. A deafening silence followed. I lied to the entire world. I said that Declan Hayward was an abusive husband, that he threatened me and our daughter. But it was a lie. It was all part of a political game orchestrated by my husband, Stanley Hayes. We conspired to ruin an innocent man and remove him from our path. Tears ran down her cheeks now, but this time they were real. I sold out the man who once loved me, who did everything for me, for power, for comfort, for money. Her voice shook. She felt the ground slipping from beneath her. I destroyed his life, and now it's time to pay the price. She pressed the stop button on the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. Declan reached out, took the phone. Lily let out a strangled sob, as if only now realizing what she had just confessed. Well, that's that, Declan said coldly. You're no longer Mrs. Hayes. Now, you're just what you always were, a traitor. He nodded to one of the soldiers. The man silently connected the phone to a laptop, uploaded the video, and hit send. Across the country, the truth spread like a tidal wave, obliterating everything Lily and her lover had built over the years. Live broadcasts were interrupted, headlines flooded social media. Governor's wife admits to conspiracy. False accusations exposed. Political earthquake. Scandal shakes the nation. It was over. Lily dropped her head. She had lost. Declan slowly walked toward the door. They had brought Lauren. She stood in the hallway, shifting nervously from foot to foot. Her chestnut hair was pulled back into a ponytail, and she still wore the silver pendant he had given her for her 12th birthday. She looked up, their eyes met. Declan's breath caught. 2 years. For 2 years, he had imagined this moment, wondered how she would look at him, with hatred, fear, disgust. But in her eyes, there was hesitation. Dad, he took a step toward her. I'm here, Lauren. Her lips trembled. They told me you were a monster. They lied. Baby, his voice was quiet but firm. Lauren bit her lip, her eyes filling with tears. I didn't know what to believe, but I missed you. Those words shattered the last wall. Declan stepped forward, opening his arms. Lauren hesitated, and then she ran into him, wrapping her arms around him as tightly as she could, as if afraid he would disappear. I'm sorry. I didn't know. Declan held her close, closing his eyes, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. You have nothing to be sorry for, sweetheart, he whispered. I always knew you'd find your way back. Lauren sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. Behind them, a laptop screen flickered as the video spread across the world. And in this room, among the ruins of shattered lives, a father and daughter finally found each other again. The truth goes viral. News headlines ignited like wildfire, spreading the truth faster than any crisis management team could contain. Governor Stanley Hayes exposed. Political leader turns out to be a criminal. Lily Hayes admits the accusations against veteran Declan Hayward were false. Scandal of the century. Corrupt official caught in a web of lies. The nation demands justice. Every news channel, every newspaper, every blogger was dissecting the scandal. In Congress, have you seen this? Senator Grayson, an old political shark, slammed his tablet onto the table. That bastard played all of us. He was our top investment, another senator muttered, nervously tugging at his tie. We backed him. We funded his campaign. Now he's radioactive. No one wants to be associated with a man who framed a war veteran. And what does the president say? Officially, we're awaiting an investigation. Unofficially, Hayes is already dead to everyone. On social media, while politicians scrambled to contain the catastrophe, the public celebrated. On Twitter, X, the hashtag Free Declan surged to the top of the trends. Declan Hayward is not a criminal. He's a victim of the system. Give him back his freedom. People, think about it. This guy rotted in prison for 2 years for a crime he didn't commit. This is insane. Where are all those so-called women's rights advocates who screamed that Lily was a victim? Where are the media outlets that dragged an innocent man through the mud? The system wanted to break a veteran, but he came back, and now they'll regret it. Outside the courthouse, a crowd gathered, holding signs, Free Hayward. Truth has prevailed. Jail the real criminals. Some people burned posters with Stanley Hayes' face on them. Others stood with microphones, recounting how, 2 years ago, they had believed the lies. At Lily's house, she sat alone, curled up on the couch. Her phone was ringing nonstop. Former friends, colleagues, even lawyers, everyone was avoiding her now, like she was infected with the plague. Her face was plastered across every screen in the country, but not as the woman who escaped a tyrant. As a traitor, a liar, a manipulator. She turned on the TV. A talk show was airing, with guests dissecting her confession. Lily Hayes is a disgusting example of how someone can destroy an innocent man's life for power and money, said one expert. Women like her cast a shadow over real victims of abuse. And let's be clear, she didn't confess because of guilt. She spoke up only when she had no other choice. What happens to her now? The host asked. She's finished. No one will hire her. No place in politics. No place in decent society. She built her life on lies, and now it's all burned to the ground. Lily trembled. She picked up her phone and opened her messages. You lying bitch. You destroyed a family, but you got what you deserved. You thought money would save you? Now you're worthless to everyone. I hope your daughter never forgives you. Her fingers shook. The phone slipped from her grasp. She had lost. Declan, the symbol of justice. Meanwhile, Declan and Lauren were in a safe house. The phone rang. It's the Secretary of Defense, one of the soldiers said, handing him the phone. Declan took it, hearing a deep, serious voice on the other end. Mr. Hayward, I want to personally apologize for the injustice you endured. Declan smirked. I don't need apologies. I need justice. The secretary paused for a moment. It's already in motion. Your case has been fully reviewed. You have been officially declared innocent. They should have done that 2 years ago. We can't give you those years back, but we can offer you something else. The secretary's voice grew firmer. We know you're not just a man who survived betrayal. You're a symbol, and this country needs men like you right now. Declan looked at his daughter. She was holding his hand, gripping it tightly, as if afraid he would disappear again. I'll think about it. Justice had prevailed, but his journey was far from over. A conversation that should have happened long ago. The room was quiet. A warm, living silence, not the kind that hid lies, but the kind where you could finally breathe freely. Lauren sat across from Declan, wrapped in a hoodie, her chestnut hair slightly messy. But in her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in a long time. Curiosity, a desire to understand. Declan studied his daughter carefully. 2 years. 2 goddamn years lost. Her shoulders were broader. Her gaze held something older, something hardened. He had missed it. Missed her growth, her fears, her hopes. But he was here now, and he had a chance. Do you want to know the truth, sweetheart? He finally asked, leaning back in his chair. Lauren nodded. All of it. No filter. He exhaled. All right. Then listen. He clasped his hands together, gathering his thoughts. Once, I believed the world was black and white, that there was good and evil, that people were either decent or corrupt. But then I ended up somewhere where the rules were completely different. Lauren leaned in slightly. Va? He smirked. You could call it that. He looked her straight in the eyes. I was part of a special operations unit that worked where regular troops didn't go. We handled things that weren't discussed in Pentagon briefings. Missions that never made the news. Eliminations, interceptions, sabotage of enemy infrastructure, rescues of people no one was supposed to save. Lauren froze. You were an agent? Not exactly. But my unit. Declan glanced at his hands at the old scars. We weren't just soldiers. We were wolves. Hunters. She stared at him, wide-eyed. Did you kill? Declan remained silent for a few seconds. Yes. Lauren swallowed hard. And do you regret it? I regret something else. He exhaled. That sometimes we had to leave behind people we could have saved. That the good guys died while bastards like Hayes stayed in power. She pressed her lips together. Did Mom know? Declan shook his head. No. When I left, I thought I had put all of that behind me. I thought the farm, our family, it was a new chapter. But the world doesn't work that way. It doesn't like when men like me just disappear. Lauren studied him for a long time, taking in every word, processing everything. And then, slowly, she smiled. Dad, I think I'm more interested in hearing about you and your friends. Declan blinked, caught off guard. I had no idea veterans had that kind of power. Who are you, really? Declan smirked. You want to know? She nodded. He leaned in, his voice lowering just slightly, making it all the more certain. I'm the kind of man you should never cross. Her eyes gleamed with admiration. Tell me everything. And so he began. A new life for the first time. Life had found peace. Not the suffocating stillness of a prison cell. Not the artificial calm of the farm before the betrayal. But something real. Something free. After everything that had happened, Declan and Lauren didn't immediately adjust to normal life. The first few weeks, they stayed under military protection, avoiding journalists and cameras. But the truth had already done its work. The world now knew that Declan Hayward had been a victim of lies. And now, most people just wanted to leave him alone. The farm, where he had once been happy, he sold. That life was over. Instead, he bought a small house by a lake in the mountains of Montana. A simple, sturdy retreat, surrounded by nature, away from prying eyes. Lauren flourished. She no longer looked frightened or lost. She laughed again, walked the forest trails, learned to shoot a rifle, under his careful guidance, of course. In the evenings, she sat on the porch, reading books by firelight. She said one night, tossing a stick into the fire, if someone had told me earlier that my dad was basically John Wick, I wouldn't have believed it. Declan chuckled. I'm not John Wick. Just a hunter that you should never corner. He didn't reply, just smiled, staring into the flames. Reunion with the Brotherhood one morning. Declan heard the distant rumble of engines. Motorcycles and SUVs were pulling up. He stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, waiting for his guests. Lauren peeked out from the doorway. Is it them? It's them. The first to step out was Hank, a giant of a man with a square jaw and his signature cocky grin. Well, you bastard, didn't even invite us to the housewarming? Behind him came Grant, tall, wiry, with ice-cold eyes, the perfect scout. Then Jackson, the best sniper Declan had ever known. And several other brothers, men who had walked through hell with him. You brought the whole damn battalion? Declan smirked. Damn right. We don't need a reason, brother. Lauren looked at them in awe. This is them? Declan nodded. The real sons of bitches. You do know I can hear you? Hank grinned. What? You want a compliment? Laughter rippled through the group. Declan embraced each of them, feeling the strength of their handshakes, the unity he had missed so much. Well, since you're here, he said, let's grill some steaks. That night, under the vast Montana sky, they sat around the fire, drinking whiskey, laughing, and reminiscing about the past. Lauren sat beside her father, listening intently, absorbing every story. She was no longer the girl who could be easily manipulated. She was proud of her father. Declan watched the fire, listened to the laughter of his brothers, and felt something settle deep inside him. Finally, he was free, and no one would ever take his life from him again.